In part 4 of our recap of the Metal Gear series, we took a look at the momentous events in the second half of the Phantom Pain, while also talking about how the events of that game tie into future events in the series. In part 5, we will take a look at Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2, including the introduction of Solid Snake to the story and his fierce battle against the forces amassed by the fallen legend Big Boss. The story of the Phantom Pain ends in the year 1984, with both Big Boss and his body double Venom Snake working in different capacities to make the dream of Outer Heaven a reality. The events of the first Metal Gear transpire in 1995, and a lot has happened in that time. Big Boss's dream to turn Outer Heaven into a soldier's refuge has warped beyond recognition to the point that he is now becoming a warmonger. Outer Heaven is now an established, heavily fortified state, but no one in the world really knows who their legendary mercenary leader is. To the outside world, Big Boss is the leader of the reformed Foxhound unit. Well, at least for the time being. What's more, in the intervening decade, Venom Snake, on the orders of Big Boss, dissolved Diamond Dogs and merged them with Outer Heaven. By this time, Solid Snake, one of the genetic super soldiers to come out of the L'Enfant Terrible project, has now become a member of the Foxhound unit. He is under the tutelage of Kazuhira Miller, who he calls Master Miller. Miller served as Snake's drill instructor and has played the role of mentor to him, and the two share a close bond. Shortly before the beginning of the original Metal Gear, powerful Western states receive intelligence that a weapon of mass destruction is being constructed in Outer Heaven. As such, to assess the situation and any potential threat, Foxhound agent Gray Fox is sent by Big Boss, commander of the Foxhound unit, to Outer Heaven. The mission quickly goes off course. The US government loses contact with Gray Fox, who gets captured, and in his last transmission, which serves as a warning, only communicates a message consisting of just 2 words: Metal Gear. It is at this point that rookie Foxhound operative Solid Snake is tapped for a follow-up mission by Big Boss, Operation Intrude N313. His objectives: to locate and rescue Gray Fox and to assess the situation regarding Metal Gear. His only backup is support from Foxhound leader Big Boss, who remains in constant contact with him over radio from his position in the United States. Once Snake is inserted into the site via underwater insertion, he manages to use supreme stealth skills and his wits, including a rather convoluted plan allowing himself to get caught on purpose, all in an attempt to glean as much information as he can about the base and the facilities there, to learn of the whereabouts of Gray Fox. Snake at last manages to locate Gray Fox, thanks to the help of local resistance leader Kyle Schneider. The Foxhound agent then reveals him to the meaning of his last cryptic transmission. Metal Gear is a bipedal walking tank, capable of launching a nuclear strike from any terrain and surface, anywhere in the world, making it a lethal weapon of mass destruction and far beyond the nuclear capabilities of other international actors. Snake realizes the situation is more dire than imagined, and Gray Fox tells him that it's imperative that Metal Gear be destroyed before it is activated. Snake is instructed with tracking down Dr. Drago Petrovic Madnar, the creator of Metal Gear and the only person who would know how to destroy it, who should also be held prisoner somewhere in Outer Heaven. After fighting his way through Outer Heaven, big shots such as Shotmaker and Machine Gun Kid, Fire Trooper, Dirty Duck, Twin Shots, as well as fighting off some seemingly invincible cybernoids known as Bloody Brad, and several armed vehicles such as Hind D, Bulldozer, and a tank, Snake finally manages to reach the place where Dr. Madnar is located. Madnar does not prove to be cooperative though, and he informs Snake that he will only share the details about Metal Gear and how the bipedal tank can be destroyed if Snake first rescues his daughter Ellen, who is also being held captive in Outer Heaven. With the help of a few more Resistance members, Snake manages to rescue Ellen, who informs him that her father was being made to develop Metal Gear TX-55 under duress, with her being used as a hostage. With Ellen rescued, Dr. Madnar finally informs Snake of Metal Gear's location and the exact method of destroying it, placing plastic explosives on its feet. Snake begins to make his way to the hangar where Metal Gear is kept, but he also starts to notice that things are starting to go wrong. The enemies seem to be too informed of his movements, far more than they should be even when taking all of the surveillance of the facilities into account. Meanwhile, Big Boss, who has been in constant contact with him via radio, appears to be acting erratic and strange, at one point even asking Snake to abort the mission. Outnumbered, outsmarted, and with no resources on his side, Snake nevertheless manages to make his way to where Metal Gear TX-55 is kept, and manages to destroy the bipedal tank, neutralizing the threat. This, however, initiates Outer Heaven's self-destruct sequence, prompting Snake to hasten his escape. in the course of which he finds himself face to face with the leader of Outer Heaven's facilities, who is finally revealed to be Big Boss himself. Big Boss informs Snake that the entire mission he had been sent on had been a decoy, with Snake himself being sent to only unwittingly gather false information. Big Boss seemingly underestimated Snake's resourcefulness and never expected him to come as far as he had. Big Boss is revealed to be the legendary mercenary who funded Outer Heaven, and he declares his dream of a haven for soldiers without a nation, a dream which he had started with MSF and grown with Diamond Dogs, acting as one of the nuclear powers in the world, outstripping even the West and the USSR, so that it can continue to remain defiant in the face of opposition. Faced with betrayal and the threat of geopolitical upheaval, Snake nonetheless manages to defeat the legendary soldier in a ruthless battle. He escapes as Outer Heaven is destroyed and calls Foxhound, informing them that the threat is neutralized and that Operation Intrude in 313 had been a success. It is unknown to him, however, that the Big Boss he defeated was not really Big Boss at all. Big Boss, of course, is still in the United States, and the man who Snake defeated was actually a body double. Yes, it was none other than Venom's Snake, who had been acting on Big Boss's command as the leader of Outer Heaven. He was a man who lived as a phantom of the legendary Big Boss, and has now died as one too. Big Boss, it turns out, is still alive, and he recognizes Snake as a viable threat. He isn't done with Solid Snake, and his dream of creating a perfect soldier's refuge isn't over either. Outer Heaven was just one cog in his machinery. Big Boss leaves the USA and Foxhound and goes into hiding. 4 years later, by the end of the 20th century, the Cold War is beginning to thaw out. It looks like relations between the US and the USSR are beginning to stabilize a bit, and that threat of imminent nuclear proliferation may be a thing of the past. On the surface of it, things look to finally be taking a turn for the better. However, this is more like the calm before the storm. In this period, the world has hit an oil crisis, and all efforts to develop an alternative source of energy are bearing no fruit. Amidst all of this, Czech scientist Dr. Kio Marv bioengineers a new species of algae known as oilix that may be the answer to these problems. On his way to a demonstration of this newly engineered algae, however, he goes missing. That's not the only problem. Zanzibar Land, a small nation bordering Russia, China, and Central Asia, has apparently been working on seizing nuclear sites, and has consequently become one of the world's few remaining nuclear powers. NATO realizes that there may be a connection here. Zanzibar Land's leaders may be working on seizing existing weapons of mass destruction. Meanwhile, intelligence suggests that its leaders plan to hold the world hostage by controlling the supply of oil. How do they plan to do this? It turns out that Dr. Marv was abducted by none other than the masterminds of Zanzibar Land. By controlling the oilix algae while simultaneously also holding the specter of looming nuclear war over everyone's heads, Zanzibar Land plans on truly becoming one of the greatest powers on the global stage. An international incident seems unavoidable, and any diplomatic or political engagement threatens to escalate into war. In order to deal with the situation, Colonel Roy Campbell, who is now leading the Foxhound unit, brings Solid Snake out of retirement, and his mission this time around is to rescue Dr. Kio Marv. When Snake is inserted into Zanzibar Land, he comes into contact with Holly White, an undercover CIA operative posing as a journalist, who tells him that she will be providing him support for the mission. As Snake makes his way towards Dr. Marv's location, he is attacked by a figure known only as Black Ninja. Black Ninja was part of a special forces unit consisting of technologically enhanced ninja-like soldiers, secretly formed by NASA, who envisioned conflicts in outer space in the future. Absurd, yes, and a little over the top, but that's Metal Gear for you. Anyways, Black Ninja now functions as a mercenary whose allegiances lie with Zanzibar Land. It is revealed that Black Ninja is none other than Kyle Schneider, who is the leader of the resistance against Big Boss's regime in Outer Heaven. When his true identity is revealed to Solid Snake, the former resistance leader reveals some startling facts. Unbeknownst to Solid Snake, when he left Outer Heaven after completing his mission 4 years ago, NATO launched a massive bombardment including nuclear strikes against the fortified state, afraid of their potential for troublemaking in the future. Outer Heaven was completely wiped from the face of the Earth, killing anyone that was in the area, regardless of whether or not they had ties to Big Boss's regime, including many war orphans and resistance members. This incident was largely covered up and hidden from the media, and very few people even know it happened. Snyder reveals to Snake that the leader of Zanzibar Land is actually none other than Big Boss himself. Snake, who doesn't know that the man he defeated 4 years ago is actually Venom Snake, is obviously shocked by this news. Big Boss accrued a huge number of allies over the past 4 years, using NATO's ruthless attack against Outer Heaven as motivation for many of them, including Schneider, and established his foothold in Zanzibar Land to keep his dream of a soldier's refuge alive. Snake battles against Schneider and manages to defeat him, and with this crucial new piece of information, he moves forward with his mission. He infiltrates a facility in Zanzibar Land where he finds himself reunited with yet again another face from the past, Dr. Madnar, who apparently has been kidnapped again to work on a new Metal Gear, this time known as Metal Gear D. Madnar has also been conscripted to work on smaller, non-nuclear Metal Gear units, similar to the Walker Gear units that Skullface had worked on over a decade ago. Madnar confirms to Snake that Big Boss is indeed still alive and well and now heads Zanzibar Land. Madnar tells Snake of the location where Dr. Marv is being held, urging him to save him. Snake, faced with the prospect of trudging across the desert to save Marv, attempts to do so, but finds himself face to face with a number of challenges. He squares off against Zanzibar loyalists Running Man, Four Horsemen, and Red Blaster. Eventually, with the help of Holly White and Kazuhira Miller, who is in contact with him over radio, Snake manages to find the radio frequency of Dr. Marv. As it turns out, though, the man does not speak English. As such, Snake is faced with the prospect of having to find an STB agent named Gustava Hefner, who is also Marv's bodyguard and should be able to bridge the communication gap. Along the way, Snake manages to extract Madnar, and the two of them and Hefner make their way to the detention camp, where they run into Metal Gear D. What's more, the bipedal tank is piloted by none other than former Foxhound agent Gray Fox, who was believed dead at this point. He too was one of the people who was recruited by Big Boss in the aftermath of Operation Intrude 313. A missile fired by Metal Gear D kills Hefner, and Madnar is captured once again. Desperate to conclude the mission and ensure the safety of the world, Snake fights through the facility to make it to Dr. Marv's cell. Along the way, he fights off several other of Big Boss's top operatives, including the likes of Jungle Evil and Night Fright. When he finally makes it to the location where Dr. Marv is supposedly being held captive, he realizes that it's too late. Dr. Marv was unable to survive repeated torture sessions and now lies dead. Snake gets to work to retrieve the formula of Oilix when a transmission from Holly White informs Snake that Madnar was not really captured, but voluntarily recruited by Zanzibar Land. Madnar admits that he did in fact cause the deaths of Marv and Hefner and attempts to attack Snake, but is dispatched of quickly. Battered and disillusioned, Snake nevertheless manages to retrieve the Oilix formula from the facilities, before he is confronted by Madnar again. A repentant Madnar tells him of Metal Gear D's weakness, right before Snake finds himself engaged in another battle with the bipedal tank, piloted once again by Gray Fox. Snake manages to use his newfound knowledge to take the Metal Gear down, but while he was distracted, Gray Fox extracts the Oilix formula from him and attempts to escape. Snake follows in pursuit, traversing a deadly minefield. Snake learns that he was once engaged to Hefner. Gray Fox and Snake engage in an intense and thrilling battle. This is one of the most epic scenes in the entire Metal Gear history, where two best friends were forced to fight off each other due to changing times and situations. Eventually, Snake is successful in defeating Fox and retrieving the Oilix formula. Gray Fox seemingly dies, and as he does, Snake comforts him in his final moments, telling him that Hefner is waiting for him on the other side. If you've been keeping up with the story so far, and you are familiar with the nature of Metal Gear stories, you know that things aren't finished yet. Snake is taunted by a familiar voice, who, it turns out, is Big Boss. Snake comes face to face with his former mentor, when he finally admits his true reason for coming out of retirement, a desire to make amends and make the nightmares that have haunted him ever since the Outer Heaven incidents go away. Big Boss answers introspectively, telling Snake that the nightmares never go away. He attempts to explain his viewpoints to Snake. Start a war, fan its flames, and create victims, says the fallen legend. Then save them, train them, and feed them back onto the battlefield. Soldiers, Big Boss says, can never find peace or rest. They can never lead normal lives. Soldiers need the heat of battle and war to be able to belong anywhere in this world. Big Boss understands that better than anyone, which is why he has worked with such a single-minded focus on creating a perfect soldier's refuge, from MSF to Zanzibar Land. Snake realizes that his former mentor is beyond salvation and decides to kill him once and for all, but before he does, Big Boss has one final piece of advice for Snake. "It doesn't matter who wins here," he says ominously. "Our fight will continue. The loser will be liberated from the battlefield, and the survivor will live out the rest of his days as a soldier. In a thrilling, climactic battle, Snake manages to defeat Big Boss, apparently finally killing him with a makeshift flamethrower. Him and Holly White fight their way through the facility to the extraction point, where they finally leave Zanzibar Land, leaving behind the burning wreckage of Big Boss's dreams. After the mission concludes and the Oilix formula is confirmed to be authentic, Colonel Campbell offers Snake to rejoin Foxhound. Snake refuses, claiming he is free of his nightmare, and goes incognito, not to be heard from for many years to come. In the meantime, the Patriots get a hold of Big Boss's body from Zanzibar Land. And that's it for Part 5. When we come back for Part 6, we will take a look at the events that transpire during the course of Metal Gear Solid, and talk about the long-running battle between David, also known as Solid Snake, and Eli, also known as Liquid Snake, finally kicking into gear.
Sleeping late as usual. A snake. Liquid, you're still alive. I won't die as long as you still live.
And that'll be about it for this one. If you guys like what we're doing at GamingBolt, please consider subscribing to our channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.